welcome everybody to today's webinar. We've got a very fascinating webinar planned for everyone today, Introduction to Workforce Management. So in terms of today's agenda, I'm delighted to be joined by two speakers, Stephen Thurston from Business Systems. Stephen's a very seasoned campaigner and will be taking us through an introduction to workforce management. Also delighted to be joined by David Evans. David's analytics is a consultant with Business Systems and will be taking us through workforce management features and also through an overall demonstration as well. David's got a wealth of experience in workforce management, having worked in the sort of roles that you in the audience are currently involved in. We then have your chance to send in your top tips during the webinar, and there's the bottle of champagne there. And we can also answer questions and answers. You can answer those questions at any time, and we'll pick those up towards the end of the webinar. So before we get going, just want to share with you a couple of polls. The first poll that I'd like to share with you is how large is your contact center? So if you'd like to vote on that, the choices are 1 to 49 agents, 50 to 99 agents, 100 to 199 agents, 200 to 399, and 400 agent plus. So if you'd just like to vote on that, we've got about 3/4 of you voted so far. So if just waiting for about 3 or 4 more votes coming in. So just like to vote on that. It's on that little bar on the right-hand side. Just going to close that off there and share the results there up on the screen. So we've got quite a large number of 1 to 49 agents and 50 to 99. I think that's the bulk. Surprising there, we've got quite a large number of 400 plus seats there. Stephen, is that a bit of a surprise to you?
Yes, very interesting actually. I guess that could be because not every single large contact center already has workforce management. That's a possibility. Or maybe there are some new practitioners coming into this role from those contact centers. But either way, very interesting. And it'll be very interesting to hear the sort of tips and maybe comments and questions I have later.
Yeah, and I guess, lots of people are sort of fascinated to know things like, what some of the terms, a lot of jargon in this, shrinkage, occupancy, adherence, all that type of stuff. So hopefully everyone in the audience will be able to know more about that than we do. Second question, how do you currently manage your workforce resources? And this is multiple answers are allowed here. Do you use Excel spreadsheets for your forecasts or schedules? Do you already have a workforce management system in place? Are you thinking of investing in a workforce management system? Do you have a bespoke system developed in-house, or is it none of the above? And you can vote for more than one. Category on this. Now, I'm probably going to, before the webinar, I thought that probably spreadsheets is going to come quite high up on this.
Yeah, it's David. I think spreadsheets will potentially be the biggest answer.
And you can't see the results here. Do you think it's going to be sort of higher than 50% or lower?
Oh, I'm going to say around 60%. That's my forecast anyway.
I think you must be. I think you must be seeing my screen here, because I'm just going to share that. And that actually
spot on.
And that wasn't a fix. Actually, spot on. About 60% using spreadsheets there. 33% are using a workforce management system. Around 15% are thinking of one, and about 10% are none of the above. So I think you're probably in the audience in for a bit of a treat here as we take you through how some of that technology works. So I'm just going to hand now back across, and so I just need to hide the results of the poll there, and hand over across to Stephen, who's going to take us through an introduction to workforce management.
Okay, thanks very much, John T. It's nice to be addressed as a seasoned campaigner. I hope it doesn't make me sound too old, but anyway, we'll get on. I shan't read through the agenda items. Everybody can read through those themselves, but what we're attempting to do today is take people through a logical journey of workforce management, really what it's about, how you might be planning to implement it, and some hints and tips about actually getting some money for it. It's to provide a bit of insight for those who really need a little bit more information on workforce management, and those who are considering it, and also for people who've heard about it but really have no idea what it is or just need a little bit of more information. A high-level view of the concept of workforce management, key features and tips on making a business case and which areas should be considered. And also, as John T. rightly said, an attempt to demystify some of the jargon that exists around the workforce management field, as of course all fields do. Now, who recognises this? I'll bet everybody. We're all customers of contact centres one way or another, and the number of times that I have to hang on for minutes, it seems like hours sometimes to get through, and often give up in frustration. And the young lady here, I don't know why she's got a smile on her face, because she's actually set her alarm clock for midnight to wake up and try and get through to the contact centre when maybe it's a little bit quieter. So it's safe to say that whoever it is she's trying to contact there doesn't have workforce management in their organisation, because she certainly wouldn't need to be doing this if that were the case. So what is workforce management? Well, our key aim today is to show you how it's able to optimize resource, to achieve service levels that you require and that your customers require of you, at the most effective cost. It says in my notes here, the cheapest cost. Well, it's not actually the lowest cost. It's always going to be the cost that is actually the lowest achievable cost to get that balance right. And in simple terms, what do we need? What have we actually got at the moment? And what's the difference? And that's as far as resource is concerned, of course. Okay, the key message then in workforce management is that it provides the balance between operational efficiency and customer satisfaction, both very, very important things for our businesses. In a contact center, approximately 60% of costs are your labor costs, the costs of your agents. And workforce management provides the capability to optimize staff and therefore keep your costs to the correct and optimal level. And this is, of course, balanced against customer experience. Many contact centers have multiple service levels for telephony and back office. And workforce management provides resource requirements for multi-site and multi-channel contact centers, which is not necessarily possible in manual environments. It's designed to minimize the administration that needs to be applied to actually managing your contact center. The supervisor's time is reduced through automation of shifts and holiday application and holiday swaps, etc. And indeed, agent attrition is affected because workforce management provides a far better variety of shift patterns. And as we will see as David takes us through the system, agents can view and request changes and swap shifts. So it makes the organization a much better place for agents to work in. And in fact, workforce management provides the balance that, in essence, you can't get through manual spreadsheets. So I'm going to hand over to David at this point.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm going to talk through identifying the need for workforce management in your organisation. So I'm sure some of you will recognise this. Those are the 60% of people without workforce management may identify with this. And I know from personal experience that these are some of the issues I faced when I was planning without workforce management. So it's often a firefighting environment. You get a sudden influx of contacts or calls, and that would cause panic. We used to call it the knee-jerk reaction. On some days, agents would have steam coming out of the ears for the amount of contacts they're trying to take, and other days they were bored and underutilised. And when we come around to budgets or trying to work out what our training needs were, it was often a finger in the air, a bit of a guesstimate. And creating those schedules, particularly in Excel, seemed to take hours. Incredibly laborious, time-consuming. And when we eventually managed to finish them and release them to the agents, well, the feedback we got were, they're not fair. Why am I constantly being scheduled on a Saturday or a Friday night? So there was a perception that the scheduling and planning was some sort of wizardry done in the corner of the contact center. So there was no visibility, and because of this lack of visibility what the agents were doing, it was difficult to improve the performance in the contact center. So if you are using spreadsheets, is it time to ditch it? Well, I think there's a tipping point where spreadsheets start to become unmanageable. So, I mean, I love a good spreadsheet, don't get me wrong. I could do them all day. However, there is a critical mass where it becomes painful to maintain. So it often starts out as a very simple process, but becomes very quickly overly complex, particularly when you're looking at trying to schedule multi-skilled staff. I also think that spreadsheets tend to create what I call a cottage industry, and they're often in the hands of one individual who quickly becomes indispensable to the organization. It's all locked in their head and often in a password-protected sheet.
And I often, find that with spreadsheets, you can probably just about manage the forecasting side of it, but I think it's really on the scheduling side, and certainly the visibility of spreadsheets is where one of the big areas where I think they tend to fall down. Definitely.
I totally agree with John today. I mean, for me personally, the most compelling reason to bin these spreadsheets, they just don't provide that visibility of your workforce management or techniques, not only to the business but also to the agents. So for those who are using spreadsheets, I do share your pain. I have been there, but it's potentially time to see what workforce management can offer. So I'm now going to talk through some workforce management features, but before we do that, we've got another webinar poll. I'll hand back to John too.
Yeah, and the poll we have, just to get the polls up on the screen here, is what problems do you face when you're forecasting forecasting using your current system or processes? The answers are lack of historical data to build forecasts, forecasting requirements for multi-skilled staff, difficulty in forecasting for multiple channels, volume change frequently making forecasting difficult, and time to produce the forecast and what-if scenarios. So I guess there's quite a range there. Stephen, any sort of any takers of which couple you think were there? I'd probably think that volumes changing frequency might be one.
Yeah, I think they're all very valid, and possibly they relate to different types of contact centres. I think in many of the contact centres that I've been and visited and work with, that the changes as things change intraday, it's really very difficult to manage those scenarios, and that can cause chaos in a contact centre. Anyway, let's see.
Let's go and have a look at the results there. Quite fascinating. Lack of historical data wasn't the biggest one there.
I think I got you there, John T, actually.
So forecast volumes changing frequency, making things difficult. Certainly on things like, it's quite easy to do a daily forecast, I guess, but intraday is where it gets, you come in, it all starts going a bit
pear-shaped.
by 10 o'clock,
yep.
And then you're struggling to adjust to find out what happened, particularly things like the weather. One of the classic ones is stuff like mail sort 3, where the post office say we'll deliver it in the next 7 days, but it's the day of their choice, not of the day of yours. Yep. So quite fascinating there. Multi-skill also quite popular, and also the time taken. So I guess those are all quite common then. Just want to drill down on that a little stage further. So we've gone through a whole range there. I wonder if you could now share with us what is your biggest of these challenges with forecasting, and what is the most difficult thing that you have to manage with your forecasts. So if you'd just like to type that into the box on the right hand side. So if you type those in, I'll give you a little while to type in what you think is the biggest problem you've got. You've got a few comments coming through. Rob says that Excel expertise is one of the problems. Timescales is quite a challenge. We've also got weather and marketing being one of
Yeah,
the...
I was going to say marketing, actually. The marketing springs some nice surprises on the Poor Contact Centre quite regularly, I find.
Yeah, Tanya says last minute marketing changes again. Samantha says different levels of changing resource with regards to training. Multi-forecasting mails with no data for emails, quite interesting. IT issues resulted from volumes. Looks like there's a bit of a problem there.
Yeah.
Dealing with an incredible volume of information. Certainly there's, when you get into a multi-skilled,
Yeah.
Information overload can cause massive problems and just chaos as well.
I do think as well, John, in terms of the weather, that does make a big impact on volume. So when I was working in a retail environment, a very sunny day would result in an uplift in activity the day after for people buying summer-type clothes. I know we've not seen that this summer, but believe me, that does happen.
So we've got a range there. Sudden changes in call handling priorities, says Julie. Someone said unproductive staff. Agent fairness is quite a challenge there. And Lucas says the WFM system is not providing the right forecasts. So it looks like you may have a technical issue with that one. And Karen says the challenge is measuring forecast accuracy.
Yes, we'll talk about that later.
Forecast accuracy, as I know, quite a number of people are actually bonused on forecast accuracy, and that can be quite a challenge. So yeah, some quite interesting insights there, Dave. So if you'd like to take us through some of the WFM facilities around that would be great.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jonty. So before we delve into the key features of workforce management, I think it's just worth covering over what we call the planning cycle. So all good workforce management applications, and probably some bad as well, are based on this planning principle. So it's a process of continuous improvement. So that will start out with your forecasting or working out what your requirements are. Or to put it very simply, what do you need either from a long-term perspective right down to your daily and what we call intraday forecasts. You can then schedule your resources and allocate your agents to the workload. So this is where you're balancing your resource to make sure you hit your service level or business goals. So once you've completed your wonderful schedules and shift patterns, you still need to manage it proactively on the day. So there's various terms for this, known as service delivery, real-time management, but it's all about proactively managing on any changes to those contact patterns. Then the last link in the chain is about analysing performance. So what is happening? What has happened? Do we need to change anything? What was the impact of X, Y, and Z? And how can we do better next time? Now the benefit of workforce management is it provides a framework for a team and even an individual to manage through the planning cycle. So in terms of forecasting capabilities, well, I absolutely love this for workforce management. The reason is it always used to make me look intelligent, which I always thought was quite a good thing. So in workforce management, you're going to get access to all these wonderful historical trends. So you're going to be capturing the volume of contacts across the day and start to build up a profile, i.e. what's your busiest day and what is the busiest part of the day. So these trends can then be used to create more accurate forecasts. You also get access to something called special patterns. I love these. I used to use these all of the time. So this is where you're going to be capturing special or distinctive contact arrival patterns for you and use them for future events. So for example, you might be quiet on a bank holiday. You might want to capture that. What I used to tend to find is it was the day after a bank holiday on a Tuesday morning, be incredibly busy, so you'd be capturing that. There might be a product launch. We've also talked about marketing campaigns. So it's any business event where the arrival is different from the norm, where you want to store these and use them going forward. I also like in forecasting the ability to do scenario planning. So it's very, very quick and easy to provide different views and what-if scenarios. So again, I used to use these in my retail environment. I was constantly producing what-if forecasts for things like sales, statement mailings was a good one, and advert responses as well. So the benefit, again, of workforce management is you can quickly turn those around. So if your director wants something very quickly, you've got the capability to do that.
Yeah, because certainly Sean has said that his biggest headache in forecasting is proving that his recommendation is the right one. He said we shift through lots of options, but the proof is hard to demonstrate, because if it's just, I guess, if it's doing it on the spreadsheet, it's you know, it's based on, you know, kind of
best guess often, yes, and
yeah.
assumptions, and we're always dealing with cynical management
Yeah.
who say, well, yes, but you know, if that's going to cost too much.
Yeah.
So really good evidence helps support a case for better resourcing in specific situations.
Absolutely, and you can produce different flavours on those scenarios which all could produce the same results, so it's up to the business how they would use them. I also like the fact with workforce management you can forecast for multi-channel. So this is planning for different contact types, so it's not just calls to other contacts such as email, white mail, web chat, SMS, etc. So for me the general rule is if you can measure it, then you can forecast it. So you're not just limited to telephony contacts only. I think that's a key point to take away from this slide. So with all this wonderful forecasting capability, your forecast is going to become a lot more accurate and provide you with a lot more detailed understanding of your requirements. So the next part of the planning cycle is all about scheduling. So you've got these great forecasts now, how are you going to staff against them? So workforce management, you've got the flexibility to have fixed shifts, part-time shifts, rotating patterns. You might even want to consider something like split shifts, i.e. you come in the morning, take some contacts, go home for a rest because you're tired, and come back in the evening. So you can mix and match your shift patterns. It's all down to the business type and also a bit of creativity and imagination. But one thing I would say is that workforce management is eminently scalable. So even with a small number of agents, the impact is significant. So you could deploy it from a small base and it can go up to many thousands of agents. So literally thousands of agents over multi-site or a global operation. But I've actually used workforce management just to change the breaks on one small team, and the impacts of that, because it knows where to allocate those breaks, was significant. Now we talked about multi-channel contacts, so therefore we were able to multi-skill our staff, and this is delivering different contacts to multi-skilled agents. So this is a bit of a double whammy. So not only does it improve efficiency for the organisation, but it gives greater variety for the agents. So it takes away a bit of the monotony of handling the same type of contact. And how often have you tried to plan in training, product launches, one-off, one-to-ones, etc.? I know that's a real pain in a manual environment. Well, you could let workforce management do that for you. You'd have the capability to choose, not only choose the correct agents, but choose the day and even the right part of the day.
And certainly on the subject of multi-skilling, Michelle says that one of her headaches has been global forecasting and scheduling a global team with multilingual skills and forecasting volumes for each language skill, because that certainly becomes very, very, very complex.
Yes, and the sheer volume of different languages that you're dealing with within potentially one contact centre, massive.
Yeah.
I would think that's almost impossible without workforce management.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who really want to go deep and are really anarchy about workforce management scheduling, and like myself, you can talk about things like simulation. So in simulation, this actually replicates your contact center routing, your skill sets, your demand coming in, and it allows you to make some tweaks to those in order to improve performance. So that is quite an advanced one, but the capability is there if you wish to use it. Now, I could talk for hours on scheduling, and boy, I keep going on that, but I'll move on.
He does, absolutely.
So apologies for that, but we're going to hand back to Jonty now for another question. So,
okay, thank you very much. The question is, what issues do you face when scheduling employees? And the answers are difficulty in planning holidays, meetings, and the like. Agents perceive the schedules to be unfair. Agents have no forward view of shift patterns. Difficulty in scheduling full and part-time employees, and scheduling phone and non-phone activities is difficult. Now, it may be that each one of those applies to you, so you can vote on more than one elements here. Now, any guesses while those are coming in for what you think?
David?
Well, on this one, based on the high percentage of people without workforce management, I'm going to go with agents perceive the schedules to be unfair because it's this lack of visibility.
Well, let's have a look at that one there, and we'll just share the results. Well, actually, it was a very close. Very closely run there. Yeah, agents perceiving the schedule to be unfair, and we can have a look at how that a bit later on how that fairness can be improved. There'll be a little demo where we can see that. Scheduling phone and non-phone activities. That's certainly much higher there than certainly in my discussions with a lot of people.
I think that really speaks to the desire and need these days to utilise a contact centre in more ways than just answering the phone. It's a big demand. Times are very tight and people are looking to get the most out of the resource they've got. So non-phone activity is on the increase, I'm sure, across many contact centres.
Yeah, I guess when it was just phones and emails, that was sort of the golden days, if you like, and now it's social media and web chat and everything else as well.
Indeed.
Exactly.
Okay, so just hide the results there, and David, if you'd like to take us through the rest of the scheduling, please.
Thank you, John-C. So now we're on to what we call managing change or real-time delivery. So we've created our forecasts, you've got your wonderful shift patterns, and by this stage you're probably feeling very pleased with yourselves. However, what if something goes wrong on the day? What if your system falls over? Or, for example, what if marketing send out a letter incorrectly? Now, I'm sure that has never happened in any of your organisations, but let's just pretend it has for 1 second. So workforce management will provide you with the visibility and tools to proactively manage on the day. So you can call this service delivery. So you could basically automatically reforecast based on volumes coming in, assess the impact and make the necessary changes. It's very easy, and you'll see this in the product taster later on, to move agents' shifts and schedules. It's drag and drop capability in order to provide that coverage. And you also have the option to use what we call schedule adherence. Now, what is schedule adherence? Well, real-time schedule adherence is basically when we're matching what an agent is scheduled to do against what they are actually doing at that moment in time. So, for example, an agent may be late back from lunch or taking long on a certain call type, and that will be highlighted. So it can be used to highlight training needs, issues with contact types, and also provide some fairness to staff. And I've got a personal experience of deploying real-time adherence into a financial services organisation. So when we put it in, the initial adherence levels were in about the 50% mark, but after 3 months they were up to about 90%. So the impact on the service levels and for the customer experience was quite significant from that perspective. So that's managing change. Now if you remember back to the planning cycle, we're now into analysing performance. So this is the last link in the planning cycle. Now we all love to analyse, don't we? Or is that just me? Probably just me then. Okay, so in workforce management, reporting is integrated. There isn't any need for these complicated spreadsheets, and you can provide that really strategic level of reporting to the business. So again, I used to use workforce management for budget setting and capacity planning. You know, that'd be things like submitting the annual budgets. I've also done 5-year operating plans via workforce management. And without workforce management, that would have been incredibly difficult because you've got access to all this excellent historical data. You've also got the capability to look at operation reporting at department, team, and agent level. So typically, you'd be looking at things like abandon rates, staff utilisation, absence rates, and also attrition rates. And if you wanted to get really, really whizzy with this, you could link your workforce management data to external data sources. So, for example, you could link to your HR or payroll system, or even create something like agent scorecards linking performance data from workforce management from other systems. So for any of those analysts, MI analysts out there, it takes away that pain of producing reports. They're on demand or can be scheduled overnight. So this allows their managers to manage rather than building spreadsheets. I just want to cover off, we've covered the planning cycle there, but it's very important, I think, to cover what we call agent empowerment. So this is where we're allowing agents to take part in the planning cycle. You know, you hear it termed agent engagement, agent empowerment, lifestyle scheduling. There's different phrases for it, but it's all about providing visibility and flexibility to staff. So the agents will get the ability to access and view the schedules in advance. So if you've got varying shift patterns, it gives them a chance to plan ahead and improve their work-life balance. You've also got the opportunity to book holidays by workforce management, and that is a big bonus. You can put the allocations into workforce management, and any agent submitting a holiday request can be auto-approved if you wanted to do that. And agents particularly like swapping shifts. So you've got a like-for-like skill set. And say, for example, you like the football, and you want to watch a football match, and you've got a friend in the contact centre who doesn't, you can ask them to swap for you. And apologies to any England fans out there on that one.
And on the swapping shifts notice there, a dealer said one of her biggest problems has been preventing staff from requesting shifts swapping and complaints. Now, I guess that's almost slightly, probably, a dealer's probably back the wrong way around. I think what you're saying there is because your technology doesn't allow easy swap shifts, you're trying to prevent people. I would probably, my personal take would be, you probably want to go the other way around and enable shift swapping, because if you allow shift swapping, you're probably going to reduce down on some of the absence rates.
Yeah, I agree, John T. I think it's clear that agents are trying to swap shifts, and it may just be that it's so difficult to actually allow that to happen that it creates that problem. Whereas if it were easier to allow it to happen, because there was a process to manage that, then it could actually be allowed for the agents to do that, which obviously would keep them a lot happier, I would guess.
And certainly if anyone in the audience has got any experience in swapping shifts, if you'd like to, or some tips on how to handle it, if you'd like to put that into the question box.
Don't forget we're looking for tips, ladies and gentlemen, and champagne is on it.
So overall, in terms of agent empowerment, it just makes it more real, I think, to the agents, makes the planning visible to them. They've got a bit of engagement in the process. The other thing I'd say about this as well, if you are looking to recruit into your organisation, if you can offer these to potential employees, it sort of makes you an employer of choice. It makes it a nice place to work. And again, through my experience in deploying workforce management, people do like this side of it, without doubt. So now I'm going to pass back over to Stephen, who's now going to talk through the delivery of workforce management.
Okay, well, I don't know how many technology people there are on the webinar today, Jonty, but this is not really a technology discussion, but I think it's worth actually just having a quick look from a high-level view as to how workforce management is actually deployed within a contact center. So from the screen, you should be able to see the workforce management server. It's one device. It's a web server. It's connected via your own local area network or wide area network into the ACD itself, or the telephony switch. The switch then provides the workforce management server software with reports at intervals, regular intervals, potentially 15 minutes, 30 minutes, to show the actual status of agents, if they're on schedule, off schedule, whatever they're doing. And the workforce management software ingests that information and then uses it to produce reports and real-time views for the supervisor or management or the agents themselves. Via their own PCs, via the webs.
Which is particularly useful for that, what's called intraday, which is, things are starting to go wrong by 10 o'clock in the morning, and presumably the systems then adjust the forecasts accordingly. Yeah,
if you can see what's going on real time, then obviously that gives you a huge advantage in being able to deal with issues as they happen and put things right very quickly to get things back on target.
Yeah, because I've been in enough call centres at 4 o'clock and people say, who wants to do overtime? And people say, well, if you'd asked me at 11 o'clock this morning, I could arrange some childcare, but I can't do it now. So it's that early warning, early visibility of schedules.
It's going back to one of those notes on one of David's slides, being proactive rather than reactive, and I think that says it all. In essence, that's at a very simple level how these systems are connected. But these days, of course, technology has moved a bit further, and business systems are very, very involved in delivering this as a service via the cloud or what used to be called hosted technology. Now, for the smaller contact centers who are actually on the webinar, this should be quite interesting, because many small organizations don't have a huge IT capability, don't have lots of resource within the IT team or telephony team to be able to manage deployment of new technology, and often where they do exist, they're booked solid for many months ahead. So they're a scarce resource. So in actual fact, hosted workforce management, which is very, very rare to date, is a very, very good way for many contact centers to actually get started using workforce management. So those servers that were historically placed on customer sites are now actually within our own data centers. They're still connected to the customer's own telephony switch, but by some bandwidth, secure bandwidth, which then sends those reports to us. But from that point on, in actual fact, the way that the workforce management technology is used is exactly the same as if it were actually on site. So the agents, the managers, the supervisors all log on via the web and in fact produce their own reports, their own intraday reports, or in fact see their real-time information as it's happening. So in terms of deployment, very, very much quicker, very much easier. So that actually pleases the technologists and obviously the users because they get to use it a lot faster. But in fact, the money people tend to like it as well because it's a pay-as-you-use service. It's not a big acquisition that requires big budgets to be produced. And workforce management, despite the fact that it's not in the top quartile of most expensive things, is not cheap. It's quite an expensive acquisition. So to actually be able to acquire it and pay for it as you use it is a valuable tool to be able to use. So it's very good for smaller organizations who want a quick route into workforce management. The pay-as-you-go option is great for finance, and it's great to dip your toe in the water, even if it's a larger contact center who actually want to try something like this out or try something alternative to what they're already using. And we are talking to some people about that sort of approach. Well, David, back over to you, I think.
Well, just before we dive into that, we asked about experience on shift swaps, and Gillian has said our workforce management system allows agents to see each other's shifts so they can approach each other directly with regards to shift swaps. Then they are approved or not approved by a member of the workforce management team. So I guess that's really the ultimate one, is if you can get your agents to sort of almost collaborate, work between themselves saying, can I swap this with you? Then a lot of that heavy-handed management
just goes away.
All the overhead's gone in terms of putting that through.
Yeah, Gillian, thank you for sending that through.
Very useful. Sounds like my top tip at the moment.
Okay, well, over to me. Stephen talked about the money men, so I'm going to talk about making a business case now. So, if you are interested in workforce management, I often get asked what areas should we focus on if we're looking to put together a business case. So, from a strategic perspective, I would cover off some of the following. There are many, but these are the main ones I would tend to focus on. So you've got things like operational efficiency. So you're going to be getting reduced overtime. As your forecasts are becoming more and more accurate, you're not going to have to paper over any cracks with overtime. And obviously, reduction in admin, supervisors or analysts, less time spent producing, allowing them to manage their teams more effectively. And we talked about multi-skill. So this is where there's going to be no more silo type approach to your forecasting and scheduling. And hopefully, you might be able to use less agents to produce a better customer service or optimize the use of them in a more effective manner. You're also going to experience reduced attrition. So based on the fact that I think agents do love the empowerment, we've just talked about swapping shifts, agents will tend to stay longer in the organization. You may want them to leave the organization, that's a different debate totally, but we tend to find people want to stay longer. And again, that's good for recruitment purposes. Now, you'll also see an increase in what we call occupancy. Now, what is occupancy? Now, occupancy is the time an employee is taking contacts as a percentage of the time they're available to take those contacts. So the net time is the time they're sitting there and waiting to take the contacts. So again, by improving your shift patterns and coverage, you're going to make them better occupied or utilized. You will also reduce your shrinkage. So again, what is shrinkage? Well, shrinkage is the percentage of pay time an employee is not available to take a contact. So there's things such as planned shrinkage, which are holidays, breaks and lunches, and unplanned shrinkage, things like sicknesses and lates. So with workforce management, you can actually phase your shrinkage more effectively. So if you're in a particularly seasonal environment, you might want to reduce your holiday allocation in your busy time and allow more people off in the quiet times. And also, you'll be able to plan using the meeting planner those training things. There'll be less last minute taking people off the phones or contacts for those training sessions. So that's where I'd focus from a strategic perspective. And from an operational perspective, now I think I should have renamed this slide, well, what's in it for me? It's from the agent perspective, they're going to get these fairer schedules. So they're going to get the ability to book and view in advance. A good example of this, I worked with an organisation that deployed workforce management, and that meant they were able to give the agents their schedules up to 5 weeks in advance, where previously it was only week by week. Now there's some fantastic feedback from the agents for that, particularly from a semi-professional rugby player, because he was then able to plan his training and his rugby matches in advance. Also with holiday booking, I find, particularly people with children, as soon as they know when the school holidays are released, they'll be wanting to book those holidays. And with workforce management, you can allocate those in. I'll just leave on this section in terms of supervisors or analysts, etc. Well, they love it. It's just very simply, they can do what they're paid to do, i.e. manage people. You know, workforce management will highlight coaching needs. They're not going to be filling around reports anymore, and there's going to be less firefighting, so time to spend on other initiatives. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay.
Stephen, in terms of...
Right. So, thanks, David. The resources that are available from Business Systems to actually support the webinar today are quite varied. We've got Jackie Griffin from NICE explaining on a YouTube clip why workforce management tools are so important. So really going into a little bit more depth than we've been going through today. Our very own star, David Evans, has started an insider's guide to planning. That's a blog which can be accessed via the website. And there are also a number of case studies and white papers on the website. In fact, our most recent white paper addresses 15 reasons why an organisation might consider a hosted workforce management solution over an on-premise solution. So, you know, real assistance in making that business case.
And for any people who've not opted out of the on today's webinar, they will be automatically sent a copy of that white paper from Business Systems.
That's great. Thanks, John T.
And what we'll also do is we'll add all those links onto the webinar page on Call Centre Helper, so you can access those from there. David, I think you've got a bit of a product sampler for us to have a look at a demo of a workforce management system. If you'd like to briefly take us through that.
I have indeed. So I thought it'd be useful to actually visually show what a workforce management application looks like. So we've talked about the planning principle, forecast, etc., but I think it's worthwhile showing some of the very high-level capabilities. So this is a NICE IEX, and what I'll first of all highlight is on the left-hand side, we've got all the menu bars, and you'll see that that tends to follow what the planning cycle we talked about earlier. So we've got forecasting, scheduling, reports, etc. So I'll just go into the forecasting menu, and in here we've got what we call the queue history. So I click on that, and it will show you all the different contact types. So there's 13 here. What you will see is you've got workload and Erlang. So Erlang is for the telephony contacts and workload is for the back office or the delayed response type contacts. And we talked about building up this queue history. Well, this is what it looks like. This is what we call the intraday. So this is connecting to your telephony and it is building up all that useful information on a half an hour period here, which you can then take and use for your forecasts. So once you've done your queue history and that's constantly updating, you then look at something a long time in terms of your forecast objectives. So in this example here, you can look at things like telephony service level. So this is 90% of calls answered within 30 seconds, or even how occupied you want your staff to be, or even what's your average speed of answer, which is 30 seconds. So with this historical data, with your forecast objectives, what you can then do is create your forecast and then schedule against those. I'll just quickly visually show you what a schedule screen looks like. So on here, this is a representation of it. For some agents on the left-hand side, it shows you how many hours they're doing across the day, and this is a representation of their shift pattern for the day. We talked about the drag and drop capability. So for example here, we've got a person called Sam Wright. If you wanted to change that person's shift pattern, it's simply a case of just dragging and dropping like that. So I don't know if you can see that down at the bottom. You've also got your little icons or activity codes for lunches and breaks. I also point out on here you've got what we call a staffing line at the top, and that is showing the difference between what you require and what you've actually scheduled. So the green means potentially you're overstaffed, white means you've got it perfectly on, and red means you're overstaffed. So it's very quick for supervisors or planners to see where they are. Now what if you've got someone calling in sick? Very simply, you can drag and drop these activity codes, as we call them up here, and add them in. So you see that sick face has gone across there for a gentleman called Nick Johnson, and you can even add in on that a bit of text. So if he's rang in sick, he's not very well, he's got flu today, we can add that in. Excuse me. You might also have someone calling in for a bereavement. So we can add that in. But I just want to show you how easy it is to navigate some of these screens in terms of managing your schedules and schedules. We also talked on...
And presumably that can then go off and adjust the whole of the rest of the schedules and forecasts accordingly.
It does. So what that will do will highlight to the planner that there is potentially an issue with 2 man down, and therefore you'll be able to make the changes against it.
Brilliant. Okay.
Now we also talked about schedule adherence or real-time adherence. I'll just show you quickly what that screen looks like. So on here we've got a list of agents and it should be updating. So we've got the names of the people along here and then what they are scheduled to do against what they are actually doing. So I'm just going to pause it for a second there. So you see that some of them are highlighted, or one of them is highlighted red. So Kevin McLean is down to be, his scheduled activity is to be open, i.e. he should be working. However, he's actually out to lunch. So he's been in lunch for 21 seconds. So that person is out of adherence. And conversely, you can use it the other way around if you so wish. We've got this person here, Amanda Bynes, whose actual state is they're taking a telephony call, ACD in. However, they're actually scheduled for a break. So it's very customizable. You can configure this. So you might, for example, have people who are struggling on a call, people late. It just gives the planner or the supervisor a view into the performance. Now, very quickly, how does that impact across the day? Now, there's a lot of numbers on this screen, but this is what you call an intraday screen. As John T mentioned, this will be updating across the day, matching your forecast against your actual volumes coming in. So you can very, very quickly reforecast to see what the impact is on your service levels. And for those of you who like a graph, as I do, to keep it very simple, you can actually see what your forecast contacts are against your actual coming in. So I hope that gives you some understanding of how you'd potentially manage it on the day.
And you mentioned shift swaps. Is it possible to have a quick look at the shift swap?
I can show you
from an agent perspective, can you see that?
Definitely, I can show you definitely that. So we'll talk about now what we call agent empowerment. So if I was an agent, we'd go through what we call in this particular instance a web station. So you would get into a web-based view of your shifts and schedules. So as John T was just mentioning, you could potentially do scheduled trades or shift swaps. So on this is my name under the agent web station. I'm called Ron Murphy for today.
Oh, hello, Ron.
Hello there. How you doing? So what we've got here, you've got shift swaps available. So you could say what I would give away is Friday, 8:30 till 5, and what I receive is off. So I'm looking to swap either with a particular individual, and you can identify, or someone in a like-for-like skill set.
Yeah.
So it's very, very customizable on that. You can also see your schedules. So we talked about looking at our schedules across the day. You can even see that by the week or even by month. So this is all about this visibility and flexibility we're giving to agents. We also talked about time off. Now this is a screen where you would look to see what the holiday allocations are, and for this one we've actually got it across the whole year. So as an agent, me being Ron Murphy, I know what my allocation for holidays is, how many I've taken, and you can see here there's a colour key to show what's available and what isn't available. And what I particularly like on this one is the waiting list, which is fantastic. So on this, if you know it's full, you can still submit that, put it in, and if someone actually cancels that holiday, you will be notified of that. That's something you definitely can't do in a manual environment, and I know agents really like that because if they do get a chance to get that nice holiday, well, it's good news for them.
So that's a sort of very brief overview of the systems there. Thank you very much for that, Dave.
No
if
problem.
people want to have a look in more detail, what's the best way to, if they want a more detailed overview?
I think we've got contact details at the end of the webinar, which are up on the screen in a short while. So those can be contacted, either David or myself. And other than that, possibly going onto the website and just registering interest through one of our contact links on the website. I'm sure if somebody comes through your website as well, John T, you'll be pleased to let us know, and we'll address those questions.
Certainly. And certainly had some nice comments in from the audience. Karen said we have the IEX, which is actually the system you saw just now, and it's made such an impact. We're 2 months into using it, and we've reduced our FTEs by 4.
Well, that's great to know.
She says we use it for 24/7 and have 26 skill sets. So that's really
that's
using it to
fantastic.
its best advantage.
It'd be really interesting to know what Karen was looking to get out of this this webinar. Then, in that case, I don't know if Karen, you're still there. Perhaps you can send us a little note to say what you were looking for from this.
Okay, that's great. Right. Well, it's now time of the time of the webinar where you have the chance to share your tips. As we were speaking, we only had so far 2 tips coming through. So while you're thinking of your tips, I'm going to put a couple through. The chances are, though, that with only 2 tips sent through so far, your chances of winning a bottle of champagne are much higher than you have of winning the National Lottery this weekend. So while you're typing in your top tips for forecasting or scheduling, and that could be through spreadsheets, whatever format you want to put those in. I'm just going to share a couple I've prepared earlier. The first tip I've got for you is watch out for the wallboard. One of the big problems in a contact center, a lot of people look up at the wallboard, see you've got no calls in queue, right, time to take some breaks. You send everyone away for breaks. The problem is that says actually what is the queue situation now, not what it's going to be like in 15 or 30 minutes. So I'd always suggest checking on the forecast, not just relying on the wallboard for those.
That's a good tip,
John. And my second tip is, which is very pertinent right now, is cleanse your historical data. We all have days when the call volumes go through the roof or actually fall to the floor. And if you don't cleanse your data, your forecast will assume that will be happening next year. So there'll be an assumption that next June there'll be a Tuesday bank holiday, and there'll be an assumption that there's going to be an Olympics next year, both of which won't happen, but something else might. So cleaning your historical data, absolutely critical to any of those systems.
Agreed.
Right, let's go through and we'll have a look at what tips have been sent through. So the one sent in by Peter, who says, even in a workforce management solution, our shifts have to be quite rigid to replicate fairness, sometimes overhitting service. So that's kind of interesting, that one there. Shifts have to be quite rigid because
I think that's part of the raison d'etre for a workforce management process and product. Shifts should be pretty rigid anyway. They're there actually designed to support the SLAs that you're delivering to your customers. So I'm not out of line with Peter. I think it's probably quite important to be fairly rigid with shifts. I think that the less rigid you are, probably the more trouble you'll be headed for in any contact center scenario. I mean, you know more than I do about
I mean, what sound that I would use workforce management to produce a number of different shift patterns which potentially could produce the same service level. So again, going back to the what if type scenarios, there's nothing to stop you doing different options which all hit the business targets. And you can actually get the agents involved with that, i.e. saying these are different options, which ones do you prefer?
So we've got a number of tips flowing through now. Suzanne has said, display agent availability on wallboards rather than calls in queue. Empower agents to take breaks when appropriate. Yes, certainly calls in queue I don't think is a great one to put, because that's kind of just says get off this call and get on to the next one.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think agent availability is a very good one there.
Yeah, that's a good one, Suzanne.
Lisa says ensure the correct forecast skill is used for the agent's schedule. That's I think certainly one that's very important.
Yeah, I mean obviously Lisa's come across that in her own contact center, but I think it's obviously very relevant and meaningful there.
Julia said involve the staff. Set up a focus group before forecasting for any major changes.
I think that's a really good one, Julia. Again, from personal experience, it's all about making it visible to the operation. Your agents, in fact, HR, finance, everyone, as many people that you can involve, particularly when you're deploying workforce management and trying to make those sort of cultural changes. If they've got visibility, they're going to buy into it. So yeah, very good tip.
Yeah, certainly sharing with others very important. Another one from Gillian, allow agents to take unpaid time off or holidays when overstaffed. For example, allow them to take an extended lunch or leave early. We often peak up for those Christmas periods if you're in retail, and there are other times in the year when nothing more demotivating, I guess, than sitting there and the calls or the emails aren't coming in.
Exactly. I mean, I've used something very similar to that when you're planning things around Christmas lunches, for example. You can plan in advance, give them a longer lunch. If it's not that busy, you can give them a couple of hours off in the afternoon for shopping, etc.
Another one was guess my events that only come up. Remember, 29th of February only happens.
Yes, yes. Well done, Lisa. That's as a technologist, I buy into that one every time.
Karen has said resource planning managers have weekly updates with the agent line managers in the one session and talk about the previous week and the week coming up to identify issues or give them guidance where I can see their advisors failing service or adherence. Is that adherence word coming up? This gets their buy-in and helps so much to achieving service level as everyone becomes able to focus on the goal. I think it's great.
That's a great tip, and that sort of fits in against the planning cycle in terms of that weekly meeting.
Right, we've got a couple more before we get on to questions. Make key contacts in other areas of the business in order to proactively be involved in change. Certainly the best links you can build, I think, are with marketing.
Yeah,
definitely.
But credit, I mean, they're all very relevant to contacts. And the contact center replicates really a lot of the business, most of the business to the outside world, and it's really important to have that.
And the last of the tips I'm going to cover today, consider using a group of flexible agents who are happy to alter shifts on a regular basis with minimal notice. They can then help to plug the gaps caused by those who prefer the more rigid shifts. And,
that's a very good tip, Suzanne. I've actually used that in a retail organisation where we actually paid the agents a slight increase in wages for that flexibility, but we were able to use them in periods of high demand.
Yeah, so very good. We've got a couple of
very, very good tips there.
A couple of questions here. Sean asks, could you use a workforce management system in order to marry the requirements of a seasonal demand on inbound calls by poaching outbound agents and migrating them into an inbound environment? How feasible is that as a solution?
Eminently feasible. We talked about, as I said before, if you can measure it, you can forecast against it. So I don't know if you saw on the demo the contact types. As telephony, you can have inbound and outbound. So an agent can have multi-skills, and therefore you could deliver to them an inbound or an outbound contact, or move the outbound people across in the periods when you know you're not going to be doing your outbound calling. So that's absolutely possible.
So, Sean, that's very relevant. But one thing I'd add, and probably you're very aware of this yourself, outbound agents who tend to be sales, process and focused, and inbound agents who are often more service focused don't necessarily always transfer that easily. So make sure you get the right agents who are going to transfer across and who'll fit into that cultural environment better.
Yeah, I guess it's that sort of overall flexibility. And time of day is quite important for outbound because there are certain key moments where if you hit people right, it's great just before Coronation Street, while Coronation Street, the street's on, and not so great.
But as Sean mentions, if they're available, yes, absolutely consider that.
Pravin says, where do we factor in available variables like average handling time? For instance, the green and red line to show the right data. I guess that was sent in during the demo.
Yeah, that'll be in the forecasting side when you're building up your objectives, etc. So you've got the capability there to put your HT from your historical data. You can either use that, amend it. I mean, it's incredibly flexible. So yeah, it's in there.
Okay, could WFM be used in a contact center environment using home workers?
It certainly can. If they've managed to get access to the system either the web, you can schedule for home workers, providing to take the calls.
Yeah, it's really just the technology answer to that question, Guy. Workforce management is ideal for home workers because it gives the ability to resource plan for a disparate group of people. But not forgetting, if looking at workforce management, you do need the technical inputs to actually allow you to monitor what those agents are doing. So you can plan, but then you need to be able to make sure that they're actually in adherence, which means real-time feeds. So yes, it can be done, but talk to people like ourselves to make sure that you've got what's necessary to make that possible.
Yeah, and certainly home workers are great for filling in the gaps, because a home worker would be quite happy, well, depending on the profile you get, but often quite happy to do a 1 hour shift at short notice. Yes. Which, if you've got to jump in your car, drive half a mile, half an hour back is more difficult. Last question: how easy is it to build in weather and marketing contingencies?
Well, very easy in terms of, we talked about special patterns, so you'd be capturing those events. So for example, if you've got a period of very sunny weather, you would capture that, mark it down as a sunny day, and you'll be able to use that going forward. And exactly the same with marketing contingency. So that could be a product launch, a letter, or some sort of campaign. As long as you know when it is, you can mark it and then use it going forward. So
Okay, thank you very much for that.